It's 11 p.m. on a Saturday. The driveway is lit by a single work light. There's grease on his hands, a manual open on the hood, and a cold cup of coffee sitting on the fender. His wife asked him why he doesn't just take it to the shop. He smiled and said, "I've got it." He's been out here for 4 hours, and somehow, he looks completely at peace. You probably know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. The person who refuses to call the plumber, who rewires their own outlets, who rebuilds an engine before they'd ever hand it to a stranger, who watches 3 YouTube tutorials and then just does it. Today, we're not just talking about skill. We're talking about what drives a person to fix things themselves, even when it's harder, even when it takes longer, even when no one is watching. Because the psychology behind this behavior runs much deeper than you think. Psychologists call it the IKEA effect. In a landmark study by Michael Norton, Daniel Mocon, and Dan Ariely, people who built their own furniture valued it significantly more than identical pre-built pieces. Not because it was better, because they made it. The act of creation becomes attached to your sense of self. When you fix something with your own hands, you don't just own the object, you own the story of how you saved it. But there's something even deeper happening inside the person who always reaches for the wrench instead of the phone. Psychologist Albert Bandura called it self-efficacy, the belief that you are capable of producing the outcomes you need. People with high self-efficacy don't see a broken carburetor as a crisis. They see it as a problem with a solution. And they believe, with real confidence, that they are the solution. For many of these people, fixing things isn't just a preference. It's a core part of who they are. It says, I don't need to depend on others. It says, I can figure this out. It says, I am the kind of person who handles things. Think about the classic car community for a moment. There's a reason so many people who restore old vehicles do it themselves, even when paying someone else would be faster and sometimes cheaper. It's not stubbornness. It's something more personal. When Marcus bought a 1972 Chevy pickup with a seized engine, his friends told him to part it out. Instead, he spent 8 months rebuilding it in his garage, every weekend, every holiday, piece by piece. When he finally turned the key and heard that engine fire up, he didn't just feel happy, he felt transformed, because the truck had become more than a truck. It had become proof of what he could do. This is what psychologists call competence-based identity. Your sense of who you are becomes linked to what you are capable of doing. When you fix something successfully, you're not just solving a problem, you're confirming something about yourself. And that confirmation is incredibly powerful. It's also why the people who fix things themselves often struggle to ask for help. Not because they're too proud, though sometimes that's part of it, but because asking for help feels like doubting themselves. And that doubt cuts deep. There's a reason many of the best mechanics, fabricators, and restorers learned everything they know from a father, a grandfather, an uncle. The wrench wasn't just a tool, it was a language. Research in attachment theory tells us that skills passed down through generations carry emotional weight. When a man teaches his daughter how to change her own oil, he's not just teaching her a task. He's saying, you can take care of yourself. He's saying, I trust you with hard things. He's saying, I see strength in you. And for many people who grew up being handed that kind of trust, who were shown instead of shielded, the act of fixing things themselves becomes a way of staying connected to where they came from. For others, it's different. Some people learn to fix things because no one else was going to do it. They grew up in households where you figured it out, or you went without. And over time, that necessity became identity. What started as survival became pride. What started as, I had no choice, became, I prefer it this way. Both paths lead to the same place, a person who finds something deeply meaningful in the act of doing it themselves. But let's be honest, this trait has a shadow side. There's a version of the self-fixer that isn't about confidence, it's about control. When life feels chaotic or uncertain, the garage becomes a sanctuary. Because in that space, you know exactly what's broken, and you know how to fix it. The outside world doesn't always work that way, but a carburetor does. Psychologists refer to this as a compensatory coping mechanism. When emotional problems feel too large or too messy to solve, some people redirect that energy into physical problems they can actually fix. The clutch, the roof, the leaking pipe, concrete problems, visible solutions. This isn't always unhealthy, but it can become a way of avoiding the harder conversations, the ones that don't have a torque spec or a wiring diagram. There's also what researchers call autonomy bias, the deep belief that doing something yourself is always better, even when it costs more time, even when the result is worse, even when the person who asks for help would be better served by letting someone else take the wheel. Knowing how to fix things is a gift, but knowing when to ask for help, that's wisdom. Here's what I want you to take from this. The person in that driveway at 11 p.m., knuckles bruised, light flickering, manual stained with oil, isn't just being stubborn. They're doing something deeply human. They're saying, I am capable. They're saying, I don't disappear when things get hard. They're saying, I can look at something broken and make it whole again. And in a world that often tells people to outsource everything, to hire out, to give up, to just buy a new one, that impulse to fix, to restore, to understand how things actually work, is quietly radical. It's also a form of respect for the machine, for the craft, for the people who taught you, and for yourself. The IKEA effect is real. Self-efficacy is real. The inheritance of skill as love is real. And the next time you see someone covered in grease at midnight, turning a wrench in the dark, don't feel sorry for them. They're exactly where they want to be. If this video made you think of someone, a parent, a mentor, yourself, drop their name in the comments. Because the best mechanics I've ever met didn't just fix cars, they fixed people too.